Senator, great to see you. First of all, if we could start with the situation in southeast Queensland, because the Christmas and New Year period has been a very testing time for residents and crews there. Violent thunderstorms destroying homes, producing giant hail, and thunderstorms now producing intense rainfall and flooding. We've seen roads cut, the power's been cut as well. The state governments say they've been in talks with the federal government about providing ADF assistance. From what you're seeing and hearing, should the Army be called in to help?
Well, I think more needs to be done. It is devastating, absolutely horrible and horrific for many people, especially over Christmas and New Year's. But Queenslanders are very resilient and we're used to this kind of weather. I know some people have been affected by the long-term power outages and people are getting on with things. But yeah, power's been out now for some people since Christmas night. Those Christmas nights when storms came through and that's too much really for people. And so I don't know if the Army can help there, but I'm surprised the Army hasn't been called out in southeast Queensland. You see the devastation that is going on there. You hear reports about the fact that people have had to be pulled out of southeast Queensland to go elsewhere, like Cairns, and there's very desperate situations there. But clearly the Queensland government seems to be stretched, and I'm not sure why the Australian government isn't providing more assistance here to help fill those gaps, get services returned to people as soon as possible, and most of all, make sure that people are safe, including in any recovery efforts where there's a lot of debris around.
Yeah, well, another one of our top stories this morning, a former Trump advisor and top Conservative defence analyst says selling nuclear submarines to Australia under the current timeline would be crazy. Is he right? And what could a future Trump administration, because he is leading the polls at the moment ahead of this election this year, what could it mean for our AUKUS partnership, do you think?
Well, look, obviously I support the AUKUS arrangements. I think they're good arrangements for both Australia, the US and all of the world that's interested in maintaining free and open societies. Look, I wouldn't jump at shadows at these particular comments. I'd never heard of these particular two individuals. It's not clear, even if there were a Trump president, how much influence they would have. There was some criticism of AUKUS from both sides of the aisle in the last few months as this was going through the Congress. Of course, that's not unusual in the robust democracy America has. There are going to be people with different opinions. So look, I think we should take this with a grain of salt at this point of time. It's been very positive to see the legislation go through Congress, establishing AUKUS. Obviously, though, we're always going to have to make sure that there are mutual benefits from these agreements. It's best, of course, when a country sees that they are getting benefit out of it too, and I do think we have a strong and productive relationship with the US. In that regard, I think it's very important that we look at what we're doing in the Red Sea. I don't think the federal government's response has been its best moment with their relationship with the US. The US asked for naval assistance. They apparently got instead 6 military personnel. It seemed an insult almost. So we can't just assume that the US will always support us. We've got to make sure we make the arrangement beneficial to both parties. That's the best protection to make sure our national security is maintained.
Now, religious leaders are warning as tensions grow over the Israel-Hamas war in Australia, fears Labor's new religious discrimination bill will fail unless it allows for freedom of speech but also protects against vilification. The draft bill will be ready before July, according to Attorney General Mark Dreyfus. Are you confident this bill will help stamp out the anti-Semitism we have seen since the conflict began in October in the Middle East?
Well, look, in fairness, I don't think that's the intent of this particular bill. I mean, it's already illegal to vilify others, including on religious grounds. It seems to me the failure of the last few months has been a failure to apply the existing laws. This particular bill, this idea of religious freedom bill, is tackling other issues where we've seen people's religious freedom being restricted over the last few years, including in employment situations, but not vilification per se. Look, I'm not going to start a fear campaign or anything. I'd be very, very surprised if in any way the government weakened those vilification laws. Certainly the coalition government's approach on its religious freedom bill, which we put to the Parliament, didn't get up, but we put to the Parliament, was to not in any way reduce vilification laws which exist. Those are crimes, should remain crimes, and I'm sure they will remain crimes. The law, of course, needs to be enforced. The problem I have with the religious freedom timetable that's been released is I think we're getting set up for another election promise being broken by the Albanese government. I mean, they're saying a draft will be out by July. The election will be about 6 months after that. You'll have to have consultation on the draft. It has to go through probably a pretty extensive parliamentary committee phase. This is a complex bill. It's hard to see how this bill will actually be put to the parliament before the next election, as the Albanese government promised.